Greetings to my dear guests on this video. I wish you a pleasant viewing and look forward to your feedback in the comments. Hello, my name is Abigail. Have you ever had a strong feeling that something was wrong, even before it actually happened? That's how I felt this morning when I received an invitation from the HR department. I had just returned from a client presentation that had lasted late into the night, with mascara still on my eyelashes and the taste of cold coffee on my tongue, when the message appeared on my screen. Subject: Visit to HR, 913, Conference Room D. 913, not 9, not 9:15. Not even close to normal, like 10. 913. It was as if someone had tried too hard to make it look casual, or to hide the opposite. I stared at the message, blinking as if it would disappear. But it didn't. There was no note, no explanation, just the names Jordan Kaufman, HR, and Marcus Thorne, my immediate supervisor and certified sadist who loves spreadsheets, on the list of attendees. Then I understood, not exactly, but something cold began to settle beneath my ribs. The same cold I felt when my dog barked at an empty hallway. As a child, I closed my laptop more slowly than necessary. I tried to act normal as I gathered my things. But with every step toward Conference Room D, I felt something ending. When I entered, Jordan was already there. Neat, refined, and unreadable, as always in his blue shirt and tailored pants. He smiled at me, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. Marcus arrived 30 seconds later, late but without an apology. He nodded and sat down across from me. I noticed that he hadn't even brought his laptop, just a sleek leather folder. "Abigail," Jordan began, folding his hands on the table as if announcing the weather forecast. "We want to thank you for taking the time this morning. We know these conversations are never easy." "Here we go." I didn't say a word. "Not yet." Marcus cleared his throat. "Over the past few months, we've been undergoing a comprehensive restructuring," he said, as if I hadn't run half our marketing department through it. "And after evaluating our strategic priorities and resource allocation," he paused. Jordan picked up as if it were choreography. "We have come to the conclusion that your position is being eliminated, effective immediately." The air in the room became thin. "Excuse me?" I said, just like that. No emotion, just a statement of fact. Jordan didn't flinch. "We understand that this is difficult. Please know that this decision was not taken lightly. You will receive standard severance pay, 2 weeks' salary, continued benefits through the end of the month, and a letter of recommendation." Standard? That word again. Marcus opened a leather folder and slid an envelope toward me. My name was printed on the label, like in an obituary, Abigail Lane. I still didn't take the envelope. My hands were steady, but they felt like they belonged to someone else. "This seems like a deliberate move," I said quietly. Jordan shook his head slowly, patiently. "This is part of a general reorganization across all departments. You are not an exception." I glanced at Marcus. He clenched his jaw, his eyes darting around the room, anywhere but at me. "I just finished the second quarter campaign," I said. "The one that exceeded forecasts by 27%. You said I saved the quarter." Marcus didn't argue. He didn't say anything. Jordan smiled again. "We really appreciate your contribution, Abigail. This doesn't reflect your performance." "Then what does it reflect?" Before I could ask, he added, "If you'd like, we can go over your transition documents now." Then I laughed quietly, but with a slight tremor, because in that moment, something clicked into place. It wasn't about expenses or restructuring or strategy. It was about making room for someone cheaper, for someone new, for someone who wasn't me. But they didn't know everything. And the clause in my employment contract? That came later. They didn't expect it, but they will find out. I didn't move. Not when Jordan slid the envelope closer. Not when Marcus shifted in his seat. Not even when I felt the heat rising up my neck, 1 degree at a time. I just sat there, staring at the papers that would apparently mark the end of 12 years of my life. 12 years. I gave them 12 years of my mornings, my weekends, my holidays. I missed my sister's engagement dinner because a pitch was running late. I worked through the flu one Christmas Eve to prep a rebrand launch. I taught myself Tableau, copywriting, and inbound marketing workflows. Because no one else would. Because I believed in the mission, believed in them. And now I wasn't even worth a final meeting with my team. I'd like to understand why this decision was made, I said. My voice wasn't angry. Not yet. But it had a weight to it, like every syllable was balancing something sharp. Marcus still wouldn't look at me. His eyes stayed glued to the sleek folder in front of him, like it might open and rescue him from having to be a human being. Jordan gave that rehearsed HR smile again. I understand that this feels sudden, but the decision is final. We've been instructed to proceed immediately. I blinked. So I don't even finish the day. There was a pause. That tiny, shameful beat that always comes when someone's pretending to care about your dignity, but doesn't actually plan to do anything about it. We'll be deactivating your email and access to the server by noon, Jordan said. You can collect your personal items today, and we'll have someone from facilities escort you if needed. Escort me. Like I was a threat. A liability. Not a woman who once drove through a snowstorm to present a pitch deck after the junior strategist lost her voice. I reached for the envelope then. Hands steady, movements slow. I pulled out the termination letter first. Generic. Cold. Not even on letterhead. Just a PDF printout signed by someone I'd never met from People Operations. Beneath it, a sheet detailing my goodbye package. I scanned it, each line making the nausea rise faster in my throat. 2 weeks' pay. No bonus eligibility. Stock options forfeited. Laptop to be returned by 3 p.m. today. Company health coverage ends next Friday. My eyes stopped at the bold line at the bottom. By signing this agreement, the employee waives all rights to dispute or challenge the terms of this termination or seek additional compensation in any form. I looked up. This is humiliating. Jordan's smile faltered. Just a little. Marcus shifted again, finally daring to look at me, but only briefly. His eyes were glassy, guilt-flavored maybe, but not enough to make him say anything. Not enough to stop any of it. You were in my wedding, I said. It came out before I could filter it. Marcus opened his mouth, closed it again. We were in that basement office together before the rebrand, I added, quieter now. You remember? When we had to work weekends because nobody else could figure out the CMS migration? Still, nothing. I looked back down at the form. And this is how it ends. Jordan cleared his throat. We do encourage departing employees to take time to decompress. We're also offering a complimentary career transition coach. Do I look like I want a coach? I snapped, and immediately hated how raw it sounded. But I didn't take it back, because I wasn't going to sit there and pretend this was anything other than what it was. A calculated, quiet execution of someone they thought wouldn't fight back. I stood, slowly, gathering the thin stack of papers. I didn't even bother putting them back in the envelope. I need 10 minutes to clear my desk, I said. Actually, Jordan began with that calm HR voice, we'd prefer if we walked with you now. So that was it. No chance to say goodbye to my team. No time to write a note, just pack up, walk out, and vanish, like I'd never mattered at all. But they had no idea. They were erasing a name. I was preparing a name they'd never forget. The box they gave me was cardboard, unmarked, like something you'd use to move printer paper or hide old Christmas decorations. By the time I got it home, the bottom was already starting to give. I placed it on the kitchen table and stared at it for a long while, like it might start explaining things to me. Like it could answer the question looping in my head. Was that really it? Maple let out a soft chuff from the doorway, her ears twitching. She patted over, her claws clicking gently against the hardwood. She's an old soul, rescued from a shelter after a breakup I don't talk about anymore. She's the one thing in my life that never judged me, never asked for more than I could give. Today, she just leaned against my thigh and looked up at me like she could feel everything I wasn't saying. I sank to the floor next to her. I didn't even get to finish the day, I murmured. They didn't even let me clear my desk alone. She responded the way she always did, by resting her head in my lap and letting out a deep, warm sigh. I held on to her like a buoy, letting my fingers run through her soft fur, and tried to push back the flood of thoughts trying to drown me. 12 years. 12 years of missed birthdays, of 2 a.m., Slack messages, of weekends sacrificed to last-minute pitches. I built entire campaigns from scratch, onboarded new hires without being asked, stepped in for Marcus more times than I could count, when he was too swamped, or stuck in traffic, or fighting off a cold from Cabo. And all I got in return? A 15-minute meeting, a hollow thank you, and a pre-printed form letter from Jordan, with Marcus too ashamed or too spineless to even say goodbye properly. I stood up and opened the box, pulled out each item slowly, like I was exhuming artifacts from a life I barely recognized anymore. My World's Okayest Manager mug, a gag gift from Allie after we pulled off the 2018 rebrand in 6 weeks flat. The framed picture of our team from last year's holiday party, before half of them got reassigned or pushed out. A tiny notebook I kept with scribbled copy lines, campaign metrics, and Maya Angelou quotes I pretended were just for aesthetics. And then there was the envelope, the one Jordan had handed me like it was a gift, not a death certificate. I took it to the couch, kicked off my shoes, and collapsed with Maple curling up beside me. The silence in the apartment was oppressive. It wasn't the peaceful kind. It was the kind that settles in after something breaks. Something you thought was permanent. I opened the envelope. The cover letter was robotic. No personalization, no warmth. Just a stark declaration that my employment had ended effective immediately. A bullet list of what I was entitled to if I agreed to the conditions. 2 weeks of severance. 1 month of health care. No eligibility for the year-end bonus. All equipment to be returned within 48 hours. All unvested stock options. Forfeited. I stopped breathing for a second. That couldn't be right. I read it again. Slower. More carefully. And then I did what I should have done at the very beginning. I reached for the drawer in my coffee table and pulled out the accordion file I kept for important life stuff. Old tax returns. My lease. My first offer letter from Luminar. I found the original contract, back when we were still Luminar, and hadn't yet been absorbed by Merge Labs, which later became part of the monstrous corporate Frankenstein now known as Neon Quotient. I flipped through the contract with shaking fingers. Pages yellowed slightly from age. The font laughably small. There it was. Section 6.3.3. Buried in a tangle of boilerplate legalese. In the event of involuntary termination, not for cause, all unvested restricted stock units, RSUs, granted under the 2014 and 2017 employee equity programs shall vest immediately and fully, as of the date of termination. My breath caught. I read it again. Then again. It was real. No legal jargon, no gray area. Just plain English. If they fired me without cause, they owed me everything. Every single unvested share. I leaned back, letting the weight of that settle in. Because the thing is, I'd stayed. Through layoffs, through the merger, through that horrific fourth quarter, when the product launch failed, and Marcus blamed my campaign, even though engineering pushed the go-live 2 weeks early. I didn't walk away. And in return, I had earned equity grants. Small ones at first, but they'd added up over the years. With the last funding round, the value had spiked. I hadn't even looked at the numbers lately, because I'd assumed I'd be there until at least the next milestone. But if that clause still applied, and it looked like it did, they owed me a 6-figure payout, maybe more, and they tried to make me sign it away. I laughed. A single, breathless sound. Maple stirred. "Oh no," I whispered, shaking my head. "Oh no, 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 they don't get to do this." I picked up my phone and opened my contacts. It had been a while, but I still had her saved. Mira Cohen. Employment law. We met 3 years ago when a colleague was being quietly pushed out. Mira was sharp, relentless, and allergic to corporate bullshit. I hit call. She picked up on the second ring. "This is Mira." "It's Abigail Lane," I said. My voice was low, but steady now. I was just terminated. I need you to look at something, right away. She didn't miss a beat. Are you okay? I paused. Let the question sit for a moment. Then I said, I will be. But they're not going to be. It was nearly 10 p.m., and my living room still looked like the inside of a storage unit. Open boxes, the flickering glow of the desk lamp, half a sandwich I hadn't touched. But I couldn't sleep, couldn't even sit still. Every few minutes I got up, paced, sat again. Maple watched me from the couch like she was afraid I'd boil over. I wasn't spiraling. Not exactly. I was strategizing. Because now that I'd found the clause, now that I'd reread it 10 different ways and confirmed that it hadn't been included in the severance paperwork, they weren't just being careless. They were being stupid and greedy, and they thought I wouldn't notice. But I had, and I wasn't alone. Mira had been great, supportive, calm, fierce, but after our call, she'd recommended someone else for this particular fight, Brenda Choi. If you want someone who knows every inch of labor law and won't flinch if things get ugly, Mira had said, Brenda's your woman? So I sent an email. Just before midnight, I got a reply. Brenda worked fast. Or maybe she was like me, someone who didn't sleep when the fire was lit. Subject: Urgent contract review. Abigail, this is serious. I reviewed your employment contract and the severance agreement they offered. You're right. The original clause about RSUs is still valid. They failed to mention it in the severance docs. That omission is a major liability for them, and a significant opportunity for you. We need to talk, tomorrow morning. 9 a.m. Brenda, I exhaled slowly, rereading the words. A significant opportunity. That was the first time in 36 hours I felt something close to hope. The next morning, I dressed with a little more intention. Nothing flashy, just structured, confident. I wasn't going into a boardroom, but I wanted to feel like myself again. The version of me who'd run campaigns, managed teams, solved crises, no one even noticed until they were already over. I joined the Zoom meeting 2 minutes early. Brenda was already on. She was younger than I expected, maybe mid-30s, with sharp features, blunt bangs, and a voice that was already mid-argument before she even said hello. No small talk, just, let's get into it. I liked her immediately. She walked me through what they'd done and what they hadn't. Here's the thing, she said, highlighting a section on a shared screen. This clause right here, section 6.3.3, is airtight. The RSUs were part of your official compensation package, tied to length of service and performance. You've fulfilled both conditions. But they didn't list it in the termination paperwork, I said. Exactly, she nodded. Which means either someone in HR missed it, or they intentionally omitted it, hoping you'd sign without noticing. Either way, it's a problem for them. And a win for me? She gave me the faintest smirk. Let's just say you're holding leverage now. Real leverage. I leaned forward. What are we talking about, Brenda? Just fair compensation? No, she said. We're talking options. Depending on how aggressive you want to be, you could do one of 3 things. She held up a finger. 1. You don't sign anything. We notify them of the vesting clause, and we demand a revised severance agreement reflecting the immediate vesting of all outstanding RSUs. That's fair market value, today, plus accrued compensation. 2, she continued, holding up a second finger. We calculate the lost earnings and emotional distress related to wrongful omission. That means legal escalation, possibly court, higher stakes, bigger payout, also public. I raised an eyebrow. And 3? Brenda leaned in, fingers steepled. 3. We go quiet. We don't ask them for permission. We don't renegotiate. We enforce. You're still within your rights to file an immediate vesting request with the plan administrator. If that goes through, HR will find out after the shares hit your account. I blinked. That's possible? She nodded. It's not common, but it's legal and completely justified. I sat back, the weight of her words wrapping around me like armor. They thought I was done. that they'd erased me with a form letter and a forced walk to the elevator. But now I had proof that not only had they screwed up, they'd violated the contract they had drafted, and I wasn't about to let them walk away with a smile. "Brenda," I said slowly, "what do you think they'll do when they realize?" She tilted her head slightly. "Panic. The strangest part of being fired is the in-between. It's not the dismissal itself. That's a punch to the stomach, sure, but it's clean, final, sharp. It's the after, when you're sitting in your own kitchen at 8:42 a.m., holding a mug you bought in a tourist shop in Santa Fe, trying to pretend the world didn't just tip sideways. When the walls are still painted in the color you chose to feel safe. When your dog is gently snoring beside the fridge. And yet everything feels unfamiliar. And that morning, as I waited for Brenda to finish writing the letter that could determine the next phase of my life, I was buzzing with more than just anxiety. I was charged. Brenda Choi was working from her office, but she may as well have been a general planning an offensive. Her voice was clipped, efficient, no nonsense. "Keep breathing," she said over our video call without looking up. "You're doing the right thing. You have every legal right to demand what's owed. They violated the contract. You didn't." I nodded, even though she wasn't looking. My leg was bouncing involuntarily beneath the table. She typed with furious speed. I sipped cold coffee and stared at a crack in the grout above the stove like it had answers. When she finally shared her screen, I leaned forward. It was strange to see my name at the top of something so sharp, so cold, so formal. Not a resume, not a campaign brief, a demand. Brenda's letter was surgical. It stated facts, and it stated them with finality. Abigail Lane served Neon Quotient and its legacy company, Luminar Inc., for 12 continuous years, during which she earned multiple equity-based compensation awards under the 2014 and 2017 RSU plans. As per Section 6.3.3 of Ms. Lane's original employment contract, any involuntary termination not for cause triggers the full and immediate vesting of all outstanding unvested RSUs. The severance package issued to Ms. Lane on date makes no reference to this clause, nor to her equity compensation. This omission constitutes a failure of due diligence and a breach of contract. It wasn't aggressive. It didn't threaten. But it didn't ask either. It expected. At the end was a demand for full vesting to be confirmed within 2 business days, with back pay and benefits recalculated accordingly. Brenda's name signed in blue digital ink. Just below, mine. I stared at the signature line. I hesitated. "I know it's scary," Brenda said, her voice gentler now. "They expect people like you to fold, to move on quietly. But you're not just another exit." I clicked sign. It was sent at exactly 9:01 a.m. Then the wait began. It's a unique kind of torture, waiting for a multi-billion-dollar company to realize it stepped on a landmine. There's no explosion, just a delay, a ripple in the air. Like when you miss a step going downstairs, and your heart free falls for a second. The letter had been sent to HR, legal, and a CC to Marcus and Jordan. That last part wasn't necessary, legally. But emotionally, I wanted them to see it, to feel it in their gut. I spent the next hour doing absolutely nothing useful. I tried to clean the living room. I folded a blanket. I paced. I made another cup of coffee I didn't drink. Maple kept glancing up at me like, "You okay? Or are we going to have to chase something?" At 10:12, my phone rang. Unknown caller. I stared at it, throat tightening. Then I answered. "This is Abigail." A pause. Then a clipped voice. "Ms. Lane, this is Daniel Connors. I'm calling from Neon Quotient's legal department." He didn't ask if it was a good time. He didn't waste words. "We received your letter this morning. I'm following up." I could already hear it in his voice. He knew. "I assume you've reviewed the contract," I said. A breath on the line. "Yes. We've pulled the document. The clause in question, Section 6.3.3, is, in fact, still valid under your legacy agreement." I said nothing. "And," he continued, "it appears there was a failure to reflect that in the severance paperwork." An omission, I said plainly. Yes, he replied after a pause. An omission. He sounded like someone realizing they'd stepped in something that wouldn't wipe off easily. We're currently discussing how best to correct this, he added. In the meantime, we're requesting that no actions be taken regarding equity until we have a chance to confer with our executive team. I let that sit for a beat, then replied, You have until noon. Ms. Lane? Noon, I said. I gave you 12 years. I'm giving you 3 hours. Another pause. Then, understood. He hung up. The room was silent again. But this time, the silence was mine. Owned. I set the phone down and turned to Maple, who wagged her tail once. They're scrambling! She huffed in agreement and went back to her nap. It started with a ping, soft, barely noticeable. Then another, and another. I was standing in my kitchen, trying to slice a piece of toast that had gone too crisp when my phone buzzed again. I reached for it, fingers still sticky with honey, and tapped the screen. Lydia Martin, a name I hadn't seen pop up in months. Lydia. You didn't hear it from me, but what the hell did you do? Lydia. Word is legal's been in an all-hands since 9:15. HR, too. Lydia. They're saying someone's pulling the claws. I blinked, then smiled. Lydia and I hadn't talked much since she left. Burned out, bitter, and bulldozed by the same corporate realignment that eventually came for me. But she'd been one of the sharpest writers I knew, and more importantly, she'd always had an ear for whispers. If she said there was panic, there was panic. Abigail. I reminded them who wrote the fine print. Lydia. Oh, they're not ready for that. I dropped the toast back onto the plate and leaned against the counter. It had only been 2 hours since Brenda hit send on the legal demand, and already the cracks were forming. I could feel it, like heat rising from a sidewalk after rain. The slow, expanding tension of people realizing they'd made a mistake. Not just an oversight, not a clerical error, a mistake. At 10:34, my phone rang again. I stared at the name on the screen for a long moment. Marcus Thorne. Of course it would be Marcus. Of all the people who had slithered their way through this process, the HR reps, the legal team, the executives hiding behind strategic pivots, Marcus had been the most disappointing. Because he knew. He knew what I'd given, what I'd done. And he still stood there that morning and said nothing while they handed me a death sentence in a manila envelope. I answered, but I didn't say hello. Abigail, he began, tone overly friendly. Hey, been meaning to check in with you? I raised an eyebrow, even though he couldn't see it. Been meaning. Hope you're doing okay, he added. I said nothing. He cleared his throat. Listen, I heard about everything, the letter, the clause. That's a lot. I think maybe we could have handled some things differently on our side, but you know how fast these restructures happen. Everyone's under pressure, right? I leaned back against the sink, let him squirm. Anyway, I just wanted to reach out before it gets blown out of proportion. There's still time to talk it through, maybe figure out a way to handle this more privately. There it was. The plea. The warning, dressed up like concern. Is that what they told you to say? I asked calmly. No, he said quickly. This is me. I just think, look, you've got every right to be upset. I totally get it. But this could spiral. Nobody wants that. I could almost hear the beads of sweat forming on his forehead. Marcus, I said. Do you remember 2018? The holiday campaign? There was a pause. Yeah? You forgot to route the copy for compliance, and we were 24 hours from launch. I stayed up for 36 hours straight to rebuild that campaign from scratch. Do you remember what you said to me afterward? Silence. You said, that's why I keep you around. You never make it about ego. More silence. Well, I continued, now I'm making it about ego, about mine. Because I didn't spend 12 years dragging projects over the finish line just to be pushed out without a glance. And now, I finally have something that makes you uncomfortable. I have power. Abigail, he said softly, I'm asking as a friend. Don't take this too far. A laugh escaped my lips. Cold, clean, unapologetic. You're not my friend, Marcus. Friends don't sit silently in rooms while your livelihood is shredded in front of you. He exhaled sharply. Okay, that's how you want to play it. No, I said. That's how you wanted to play it. You just didn't expect me to know the rules. He was quiet for a long time after that. Then, you have no idea what this could do. And I smiled. Yes, I said. That's the best part. I hung up, and then I turned my phone on Do Not Disturb, poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, and sat at the table with Maple curled around my feet. Let them worry. Let them run their emergency meetings and draft their apologies. I wasn't the one in crisis anymore. They were. The invitation came through just before noon, right on time. Subject, request for in-person meeting to clarify employment agreement. From executive@sistinianquotient.com. Body. Dear Ms. Lane, we'd like to invite you to meet with members of our executive and legal teams today at 3 p.m. in Conference Room 41A. The purpose of the meeting is to review the details of your separation agreement and clarify remaining items related to your original contract. There was no mention of the clause, no admission of oversight, no apology, just clarify. They were hoping to soften it, hoping I'd come in shaky, flustered, flattered to be invited back into the room where decisions were made. But I wasn't coming as a guest. I was walking in with leverage. By 2:30, I was dressed in the same tailored blazer they'd all seen me wear 100 times before. Gray wool, subtle pinstripe, sleeves rolled once. No frills, no jewelry, just deliberate choices. I looked like someone who belonged there. Someone who had never stopped belonging there. Maple watched me from the couch as I tied my hair back. I leaned down, kissed her on the forehead. Wish me luck, I whispered. But I didn't need luck, I needed focus. By 2:58, I stepped off the elevator onto the 41st floor. Everything looked the same sterile lighting, same ridiculous wall art meant to look creative, but probably cost $5,000 apiece. Same faint smell of lemon cleaner and cold brew. The receptionist glanced up, and her eyes widened slightly. She didn't say a word, just buzzed me in. Conference Room 41A had once been where we pitched our boldest campaigns. I'd watched new hires break into sweat behind that glass. Now it looked like a tribunal. Inside, Dylan Mercer, our oh-so-slick CEO, seated at the head of the table. Two lawyers I didn't recognize, both in dark suits with tight expressions. Jordan from HR sat off to the side, nervously flipping a pen. And Marcus, of course, at the far end, pretending to be calm, but clutching a notepad with too much force. Abigail, Dylan said with a polished smile. Thank you for coming in. We appreciate the chance to talk through things directly. I'm here to clarify, I said, as requested. They gestured to a seat. I didn't take it. Instead, I walked to the projector at the end of the room, connected the drive in my bag, and clicked open the PDF I'd brought. Employment contract, Abigail Lane, executed, April 17, 2012. Page 14, Section 6.3.3, highlighted in yellow. So, in the event of involuntary termination, not for cause, all unvested restricted stock units, RSUs, granted under the 2014 and 2017 employee equity programs shall vest immediately and fully as of the date of termination. The words filled the screen. Nobody spoke, not at first. One of the lawyers adjusted his glasses, leaned slightly forward. Jordan opened his mouth, then closed it again. Marcus looked like he wanted to evaporate. Dylan sat back in his chair, fingers steepled. Well, he began, we appreciate your thoroughness. This clause, while valid, pertains to legacy documents. It was never superseded, I cut in. Your legal team never issued a revised contract. No addendums, no notifications, and your severance agreement conveniently omitted this section. He smiled thinly. That may have been an error. It wasn't. He hesitated. Let's not assume intent. I turned toward him, slowly. You handed me a severance agreement that stripped me of 6 figures worth of equity, without disclosure. If I hadn't read it carefully, I would have lost everything I earned over 12 years of service. So no, Dylan, I'm going to assume intent. He glanced at the lawyers, who still hadn't spoken. I think we can all agree, Dylan said, shifting tone, that this situation deserves a fair and reasonable resolution. No one's trying to shortchange you. There were just layers of oversight. I actually laughed, just once. This company spends $4 million a year on legal counsel, and you want to tell me this was an oversight? No one answered. I stepped away from the projector, folded my arms. And I came here today because I want this settled cleanly. You will acknowledge the clause. You will calculate the full vesting value as of the termination date. You will revise the severance offer to reflect those numbers. And if we do that? Dylan asked cautiously. Then I sign, I walk away. And no one hears about how Neon Quotient tried to cheat a veteran employee out of her contractually promised equity. Silence stretched. One of the lawyers finally spoke. Quietly. We'll need 24 hours. You have 8, I said. I've already retained counsel. You've seen her letter. If I don't have a signed amendment by 11 a.m. tomorrow, we escalate. Jordan dropped his pen. Marcus swallowed audibly. Dylan leaned back in his chair, forced a smile. Understood. I picked up my bag, disconnected the drive, and turned toward the door. Oh, and one more thing, I said. You're not getting a non-disclosure agreement in this version. I get to tell my story, whether it ends well or not. And then I left the room. Their room. The offer came at 8:46 a.m. the next day. A PDF attachment. Polished language. Too polished. I'd barely finished feeding Maple when my phone buzzed with Brenda's name on the screen. She didn't waste time. They blinked, she said, no greeting. I just received their response. I sat down at the kitchen table, heart steady this time. Send it, I said. The document hit my inbox 30 seconds later. Revised severance agreement. Abigail Lane, confidential. They really thought they were being generous. The offer was higher, substantially so. Nearly double the original severance. A one-time payment equal to the market value of my unvested shares. A month of extended health care. Legal fees covered. But in bold, at the bottom of page 2, by signing this agreement, the employee agrees to maintain full confidentiality regarding the terms of this settlement, including but not limited to the RSU clause, severance, and internal communications related to her termination. Brenda was already speaking before I even reacted. They're scared. They're offering a buyout to bury this. I leaned back, eyes narrowing. It's hush money. Exactly. I stared at the screen. The number was large, life-changing even. But the silence they wanted in return? That cost more than I was willing to give. Brenda sighed into the phone as if she could feel me weighing the decision in real time. Here's the deal, she said, voice even. We have leverage, and we're not settling unless you're truly satisfied. She outlined the 2 paths like a lawyer, and like someone who, by now, knew me well. Option 1. We go back and demand full vesting payout, no NDA. You get what you're owed. They admit fault privately. You walk away clean and free to tell your story. And option 2? She hesitated, just for a breath. Option 2 is bigger, she said. We reject the settlement outright. You don't cash out the shares, you keep them. That means you become a shareholder. You gain rights, access, voting power, and the ability to initiate legal proceedings as an investor, not just a former employee. I blinked. You mean I could sue them from the inside? In effect, yes, Brenda said. It'll take longer, it'll be messier. But if you want accountability, not just compensation, that's your route. I sat with that for a moment, the weight of it, not just a payout, not just justice. Revenge. The elegant kind. The kind that forces them to acknowledge your presence in every quarterly meeting, every investor report, every future decision. But I'd need to be willing to make this my job, I murmured. Brenda didn't sugarcoat it. You'd need to commit, and they'll fight back hard. Try to invalidate you, intimidate you. But if we win? She let that hang. I looked at Maple, who was now napping under the table, her body relaxed in that unbothered way dogs have when they trust you're in control. I looked back at the screen. They tried to erase me, I said. And now they want to pay me to disappear quietly. Brenda was silent, letting me process. I smiled, small, sharp. Let's make some noise. It ended, not with a bang, but with a perfectly punctuated, ice-cold email. From ceo.officeneonquotient.com to bkoichoilawpartners.com. cc Ali Neon Quotient, legal.com. Subject: Finalization of severance terms for Abigail Lane, Ms. Choi. Neon Quotient acknowledges the contractual language outlined in Ms. Lane's employment agreement. Per your client's request, we are proceeding with full payment equal to the value of all unvested RSUs, as of the termination date. No confidentiality agreement will be required. Legal will forward the necessary documents for execution within 24 hours. Dylan Mercer, Chief Executive Officer, Neon Quotient. There was no apology, no gracious admission, no olive branch, just surrender, sealed in font. I read the email 3 times, not because I didn't believe it, but because it was so astonishingly simple after everything. They knew it was over, Brenda said, sipping her coffee over our last Zoom call. They ran the numbers. They saw the press risk, the investor exposure. It was cheaper to pay you than to fight you. I nodded, letting the words land. Brenda continued, You didn't just win. You made them play by their own rules. It was funny. When I'd imagined this moment, I thought I'd cry, or shout, or feel some dramatic, cinematic wash of triumph. But in truth, I felt clean, like I'd scrubbed off the weight of 12 years in one final negotiation, like I'd stopped asking for permission to exist. The next day, we walked into the boardroom together. Brenda and I. No entourage, no flair. The documents were waiting, already printed, unsigned, untouched. Dylan wasn't there. Of course not. He had someone else from legal do the handoff. Probably thought it made him look above it. But I saw it for what it was. A white flag. I took my time reading the papers, even though I already knew what they said. Brenda skimmed beside me, calm as ever. The final page was just a formality. One signature. No conditions, no threats. I signed. The lawyer across the table collected the pages without looking up. Thank you for your time, he said, voice flat. Brenda stood first. I followed. As we walked out of the glass doors and into the hallway, past the HR offices and the fake succulents in gold planters, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The war was over. I hadn't just won money, I'd taken back my voice. I used to walk those halls quietly, head down, shoulders tense, afraid of taking up too much space. Now I walked like someone they would never forget. Outside, the sun was brutal and bright. Brenda pulled on her sunglasses, then turned to me. So, she said, what's next? I smiled. Anything I want. The notification came on a Thursday morning at 7:42 a.m. Incoming transfer, $614,872.90. Neon Quotient Holdings. No fanfare, no memo. Just 6 figures sliding into my account like it had always belonged there. I didn't cheer. I didn't post. I didn't even tell Lydia, though I knew she'd be thrilled to hear it. Instead, I made coffee. Maple padded into the kitchen behind me, tail wagging with the same quiet rhythm she'd always had, completely unfazed by financial milestones or human vengeance. I scooped her food into the bowl with one hand, the other still holding my phone. She ate like she always did, soft huffs, gentle crunching. I leaned against the counter and watched her for a moment. Calm, centered, unbothered. I opened my laptop. There was one last thing I needed to do. I navigated to my professional profiles. LinkedIn, old email signatures, cloud storage folders I hadn't opened in months. One by one, I removed every trace of Neon Quotient from my life. No more proud blurbs about marketing leadership, no links to case studies, no cleverly worded descriptions of how I'd grown the brand. I deleted it all. They had dismissed me like a loose file in a forgotten cabinet. But I had returned. Not as an employee. As a shareholder. It had taken 12 years to build the version of myself they thought they could control. It took 12 days to tear down the illusion that I needed them to matter. Now, I held a different kind of stake in their future, one that came with rights, votes, access to numbers they couldn't hide behind HR scripts. They wouldn't be able to erase me from the past. I was in the minutes, the payouts, the paperwork. I didn't need revenge anymore. I had receipts and justice. There was no press release, no headline, just me, standing in my kitchen, feeding my dog, letting the world move on while I stood still in my own peace. Somewhere in a downtown office, they were probably already drafting the next NDA. They'd think twice now, because they knew what happened when someone reads the contract. I closed my laptop, picked up Maple's leash, and for the first time in a very long time, stepped outside. Not as someone who had been pushed out, but as someone who had walked away.